Now, the Center for Democratic Development, CDD, is of the view that metropolitan, municipal and district assemblies, MMDAs, need more capacity in the allocation and mobilization of resources through internally generated funds and district assembly common funds. Their observation comes after 3 years of ranking MMDAs in the annual district league tables. The local government's ministry made similar observations, especially about the rewarding of contracts soon after Joy News' investigations discovered that MMDAs are saddled with overpriced contracts which they find difficult to pay. CDD also proposes the mode of appointment of MMDCEs should be made more professional. So with us in the studio to discuss this a bit further is Mohammed Awal and Mavis Zupok Dome. They're both research officers with the CDD. And joining us live from our Kumasi studio is local governance expert George Che Bafo. Welcome, lady and gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
And welcome, Mr. Che Bafo in Kumasi.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So let's begin with you, Mohammed. Why is it important for MMDAs to build capacity in allocation and mobilizing of resources?
Thank you so very much. I think that it is so important because these are people who are providing services. If they do not make the kinds of decisions or they do not have a certain understanding about these services that they are providing and how to mobilize the resources to be able to provide the service, really they will not be able to provide the services better. And so over time, that is what you see. When we begin to see the variations in the manner in which districts have performed on the rankings, what we begin to see is that in some areas where we've seen a certain level of capacity to generate additional resources to be able to invest in services, you see services going up. In areas where the capacity to generate local resources like IGF, as we talked about, if it's very low, then you probably would see a certain role ranking in the district in terms of how they are progressing. So it is critical that even broadly, that decentralization would only be useful to the extent that the institutions that we create and the people who staff these institutions have a certain understanding and capacity to be able to drive the development agenda at the local level.
Now, Mavis, in allocating and mobilizing these resources, mobilizing especially, we find that there are some districts that have very little economic activity in there, so it will be difficult for them to raise the funds they need for their needs, actually. What advice would you have for them?
Right. That is quite true. Some districts are really very deprived and there are very little economic activities going on, so it's quite difficult to mobilize such resources needed for development. However, there are various ways and innovative ways. What is the district doing for citizens to understand their responsibilities as citizens to the development of the district? You can think about various taxes you can put in place apart from just looking at the market tools. And what are the other innovative ways within the district that the district assembly or other actors can bring about useful employment activities, economic activities that you can actually levy from? And also, what can you, the district, do in terms of mobilizing funds from other places, external places, apart from just within the district? So we should be looking beyond just getting resources from the district and resources from the central government, and looking at innovative ways of generating economic activities that we can get tax from, and also looking at innovative ways of getting external support for our districts.
Yeah, and in the light of getting external support, that's where we find this government talking about things like one district, one factory, for instance, decentralizing very well. Mr. Che Bafo, thanks for joining us again. Do you agree with this proposal that it is a need for these MMDAs to have more capacity in allocation and mobilizing resources? Right, Mr. Che Bafo will be joining us with the answer to that question. Okay, we have him again. Mr. Che Bafo, I was asking that, do you agree with the CDD's proposal that the MMDAs need more capacity in mobilizing and allocating resources?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect conclusion that has been drawn by the CDD. Capacity at the MMDA level in terms of resource mobilization is quite very low. one of the major inhibitions is the fact that they don't even have adequate data on
Right. Mr. Chebaf was making a point. I'm reminded of the proposals you made, and gathering data was a clear point on its own. It's interesting that Mr. Chebaf would make that point. But look, realistically speaking, what is on the ground when we go to some of these hinterland districts is that they just don't have the resources. They don't even have the personnel.
I think that it all goes down to how we create this district. If you look at the constitutional provisions, for example, in the Legislative Act around local government, it says that when a geographical area reaches a certain population threshold, but also most importantly, the economic viability of that geographical area. But in a lot of the times, you can admit, they may meet a population threshold, but is it economically viable? I think that part of the requirement of the law or the policy or the legislation really is not, we are not minded by that when we are creating a lot of this districts. That's why we face a lot of this districts where they are created at places where they cannot, there's no viable economic activity for them to be able to generate at least internal revenue to complement central government revenue for investment.
Right, I'll come back to you on that, but we have Mr. Chebafo back on the line. Mr. Chebafo, you were on a point when the line dropped there.
Yes. My point was that
there ought to be a very reliable database. You need to identify all elements and factors.
You need to identify all elements and factors that should necessarily pay rates, fees, and licenses to the assembly consent. So if the data is not available, then first of all, you would have lost the battle from the onset. So data collection and a very solid database is very, very key. And I believe that that is a major obstacle to maximization of revenue at the level of the assembly. So if capacity ought to be built, this is an area where concentration ought to be.
Mr. Chebafo, I'm glad.
According to the law, revenue officers,
revenue collectors to build the data. But if you do an assessment of the caliber of people,
but if you do an assessment of the caliber of people who are involved in revenue collection, I doubt whether they have the capacity to effectively build a database to constitute the foundation for collection of revenue.
Right, Mr. Chebafo, I'm glad you are going this route. It takes me to the next question I had, because I wanted to know what difficulties the MMDAs face in, allocating and mobilizing resources. Would you say capacity is the main thing here, or there are other challenges, for instance, the people themselves and the difficulty they have in taking to these proposals?
Yeah. Persons who are involved in revenue collection.
Who are involved in revenue collection. If
in some instances, you could even have people who could hardly write or read collecting revenue, because that's an area where people think that a lot of resources should not necessarily be allocated. So if we are able to employ the right caliber of people, build their capacity to be able to keep records, and then also do an effective and efficient assessment and building of data, then that will be a major success in dealing with the issue of low revenue mobilization. It is very important. And then also, we need the assemblies ought to track the inflow of revenue into the central fund. Sometimes you have a lot of leakage. People collect revenue, and in some instances, the money do not get to the assembly itself. Sometimes you have racketeering. People have a way of acquiring their own receipt or something, to collect revenue for their pocket. These are all issues that ought to be dealt with.
Right, let me come back to the studio with some of the issues you've raised, because it looks like Mr. Chebafo's main concern is caliber of people. Now, the most important person would be the head of the assembly, that's the MMDCE. One of your proposals is that we should make the appointment more professional. We are moving into an era of elections. Mohammed, how do we make an election more professional?
I think that what we've said essentially is to say elections are important. They are important because they reduce state capture at that level. We all know the process by which parties elect and the role that party offices, party department or their machinery at that local level, who eventually then becomes the leader of their district assembly. And so if you create an election process that allows people to offer themselves up on the basis of certain policy promises, and they are voted upon it, then it enhances accountability at that level. In the manner in which we are currently doing the appointment, really, the question about accountability doesn't exist in that manner, because the question then becomes, who is he accountable to? Is he accountable to the appointing authority, or even though there is a veneer of some kind of a popular acceptance of him in the processes that he's finally conferred at the local level, but essentially, his accountability is with the appointing authority. And so when you then introduce an election, then obviously you get people who are not party members, but they have a certain experience, a certain skill in trying to drive local government, local development, and they are committed to this, offering themselves up for elections and so on. And so we think that opening the system up can be able to resolve these matters. People who are not necessarily party people, but can offer themselves up for elections because they are committed to local development. And then also the fact that local capture, political capture that really happens at that level is really huge, and it has implications on development at the local level.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned this. Maybe I'll come to you, but I want to go to Mr. Chebafo with this point, because Mr. Chebafo, we already know that there are proposals that the MMDCE election should be run on political lines, because we find that in that case there is more interest in it at the local level. At the moment, do you think that there is a way we can make these elections more professional in the way that we select the winners?
Well, if the CDD is talking about professionalism, or for that matter, injecting professionalism in the appointment of MMDCs, I look at it as very subjective. Why do I say so? You see, you have to place the appointment or election of an MMDC in the context of the functions that are allotted to him by.
It's both political and administrative. So if it's a political office, I doubt whether the factor of the management acumen is the most important factor for that matter. Now, there's on board the fact that the president wants to put into motion a process of getting MMDCs elected. If that process is kick-started, I believe that, first of all, accountability, which is very key, to come to play, and then there will be options for in terms of choice. You know, if you have about 3, 4, 5, or 6 persons contesting for the position, then the ordinary people would have the opportunity to make a choice. They would be able to determine which of the elements contesting the election better qualified to lead the district. But as it is now, once the president makes the appointment, it's one person, and then whether the person has the skill or the acumen or what it takes to be the chief executive, that's a different ballgame. So I believe that if the system is opened up, like we intend to do, it will improve the system and give the people the options to choose, and they would have the choice, you know, to choose the best among the lot. Just like we are voting for MP. You know, we are not talking about professionalism when it comes to members of parliament, because a member of parliament is not a professional job. It's a purely political job. Of course, you need some political professional injection, but that's not the whole thing.
But Mr. Shebafa, I was actually asking about the influence of politics in this process. Would that in any way reduce the quality we are talking about?
Can you come again?
If politics or partisanship, I should say, should influence this process of election, as we have seen the local governance election system now, would it dilute the quality in any way, if I can use that expression?
I don't think so. You see, sometimes people have a lot of erroneous impressions about electing MMDCs. They forget that the very Ghanaians who are electing the president, who are assumed to have the capacity and the propensity to elect a president and also elect members of parliament, are the same Ghanaians who are going to elect the MMDCs. So why do we have reservations when it comes to election of MMDCs? Let the partisanship be there. Because after all, the winner takes all principle that we have practiced over time hasn't helped us. Allow
together with our opposition president. After all, we are building a nation, and all hands should necessarily be on deck to build a nation. I believe that what is happening now is even more dangerous and disastrous to the discourse of effective and efficient decentralization. Because now we have in Article 248 saying that it's non-partisanship. But when you go down there, deep down, you realize that it's all partisan politics.
Challenge, we have to look at how to guard against it. So in electing MMDCs in the line of political parties, perhaps in a way could help with this, such that the party is financing and not just the individual financing his whole campaign. That means that he would use less money, and at the end of the day, he will not be looking at how to get that money back that he has used to finance.
But the party
However,
may want
still,
the money back.
yes, exactly. However, that's the other part, that this is where the party may want the money back. But it's up to us as citizens within the district assembly and as within the district, the jurisdiction called the district, as it is a local election, it will guard, it will help safeguard this, because people will be more vigilant. Just as we are more vigilant in terms of how central governments spend, we have been more watchful. We have more watchful eyes in terms of that. Then the local political system, if created very well, would also create the enabling environment for people to also be able to track these things. We really need to think through and put in mechanisms, and those are the things we really have to think about, truly, about who is going to be elected, how is the process, what is the process. For instance, for the elections of assembly persons, the government bear the cost of mounting platforms for them to make address the people. Are we going to look at such ways, these options that will enable the spending to come down, so that it doesn't look like it's the party or the individual?
So you think it would be a good idea for government to support persons financially when they're campaigning? Well,
not directly, but create a mechanism and a system where you don't have to spend too much into campaigning and financing your own elections at the local level. So government should really think through it. We have to think through which mechanism would work so that we can safeguard against the person elected actually looking for means and revenue for his next campaign and elections, but rather concentrate on local level development.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I want to take final words all along, but let me give Mr. Cheba for the opportunity to comment on this issue of injecting money into the elections. A proposal is on the table that perhaps government should support these candidates when they are running for the election. What is your take on that?
Hello?
Right, Mr. Cheba, if you can hear me, what I'm asking is that a proposal has been made that perhaps government should consider...
The state.
The state.
Like the way we talk about the state supporting political parties, we've been having that conversation all along. So that it reduce the monetization of our electoral process. How can the state get involved if we wish to go through that process at the local level to ensure that the way we do for local government elections, where the state bears the cost of some processes of campaigning and so on and so forth, so that it will reduce that part of it. So it's not necessarily the government, but the state itself taking the responsibility to reduce some of these things.
Right. So that's the point on the table, Mr. Cheba. Would you have any comments on that point?
Yes, I didn't get the question clearly, please.
You know how right now with the district level elections, we have the state bearing the cost of some of the candidates meeting the electorate and some of the processes involved, even with the campaign. Do you think this could be a possible solution to what we call monetization of elections?
Well, I think that the current system does not help the cause of good democratic practice, and then also providing enough space for candidates to reach out to the people. That is why, if you have been watchful, in the recent this assembly elections, the electoral commission waived that principle that it is only the platform of the electoral commission that ought to be used to canvass for votes. In the recent elections, they allowed the candidates to also go around and mount their own platform and campaign. So it means that the current system is moribund. You see, you can tie that in with the vote turnout in MMDA elections. Very, very low. Last elections, I think we were somewhere around 32% or so.
39%.
Yeah, as against the national turnout of over 80%. So it tells you that people are not interested in the system. And if we are operating a system which is not very comfortable in terms of, with the people in terms of their responses, then we need to overhaul it. So I think that if we allow political parties to put up candidates to contest this assembly elections as assembly members, and then also have candidates to contest for the position of MMDC, the parties will integrate the campaign process, and then turnout will go very high. We'll have the option of electing better candidates because the option of choices will be available, and then accountability will be enhanced in the process. But when the person is elected, he will be accountable to the people who elected him or her, and not to the president who appointed him or her. I believe that it will enhance the entire process and give credence to the expectations that we have in terms of local governance and decentralization.
Right, Mr. Cheba, I'll come back to you for your final words, but let me first of all take those of Mohammed and Mavis. Mohammed.
I think that essentially what I wanted to emphasize on the fact that, yes, elections are important. We may not have specifically said it should be professional, but what we are saying is that elections are important. But also we have to be mindful of the fact that some experiences somewhere where we've done partisan elections, and the fact that in many urbanized cities, it is the opposition parties that turn up winning those local level elections. And they are what we call strategies of subversion by the central government. Today, the question that we need to ask ourselves more is to ask, what is it that local government can legitimately hold central government accountable for? does our policy and institutional framework clearly defines this? Because in our engagement on the DLT, the question about, my common fund hasn't come, so what have you done about it? Who did you hold accountable? If we still would have elections, and there will still be these problems about how can the local government actors, horizontal accountability, hold central government accountable for failing, for example, say, to transfer the local government funds, and clearly define the boundaries of authority and responsibility. I think that would better enhance the election process and then local government development as a whole. But if we can all have elections and there will still be existing problems as we have them today, where boundaries of responsibility and really holding agency to agency accountable for not delivering on certain commitment and promises, I think that we will still not have a developed local government system that is really accountable to the people.
So in the absence of that, the elections would not have the effect?
It will never have the effect, as I tell you, because if essentially you elect a DCE, he's elected, but still physical decentralization requires that certain monies has to come from the central level, and it's from the opposition party. And what we've known, even in Benin, in Senegal, in South Africa, where opposition parties have held those level, those city government, and the central government decides to subvert it because if it performs well, the credit will go to its party and so on and so forth. Then there will still be problems. So there has to be clarity, both institutionally and in policy, to clearly define in which areas can the local government hold central government accountable, so that if you are subverting me, I have the law on my side to go to court or to seek for some remedial actions that will allow me to be able to perform for the expectations of my own people. If we don't do that, really, our elections will not have meaning as we want them to have.
Okay, thank you very much. Mavis, let's have your final words.
Right, so to add to that, there should be clear definitions and then devolution in terms of resources. Devolution in terms of resources, especially money to run the assembly. And I would add that this should also accompany human resource. You go to districts and they don't really have the necessary human resource to manage and provide the needed services there. So if we are going to win in terms of development, then we have to look at accompany elections with the necessary processes and structures that would actually make it work. And then we should also look at these elections for sure would ensure participation. However, we should deliberately find ways and means of ensuring that citizens actually get interested in what is happening within their local level.
That's very important. Mr. Cheba, for your final words, please.
Yes, thank you very much. You see, the legal and constitutional framework for all the issues that have been raised by my colleagues in the studio are available. You look at the Constitution Article 240, and it talks about, or it enjoins Parliament to enact the necessary legislation that will transfer competences, resources, and means to MMDAs for development. And that's an intent provision. The assemblies have the capacity under their establishment provisions to go to court to compel government to abide by some of these provisions of the Constitution. But because of the structure of the assembly, you know, MMDCs who are supposed to spearhead any process of ensuring accountability of central government through MMDAs is an appointee of the president. So he does not even make a move to go to court. You look at Article 252, the Constitution enjoins Parliament to set aside a minimum of 5% of the total revenues of Ghana for distribution to MMDAs for development. First of all, who determines the quantum of resources that are supposed to be available to the nation Ghana within a specific year? Who determines that? The assemblies are supposed to benefit from that resource, but they are not part of the determining factor, you know, that ensures that indeed 5% of the total revenues have been set aside for MMDA. You look at the distribution regime, a lot of institutions are benefiting from this Assembly Common Fund. These are all unconstitutional and illegal practices. But the assemblies, even though they have the capacity to go to court and challenge these things, will not do so or will not be able to do so because of the kind of structural arrangement that we have in place. You look at guidelines on the distribution. Government, central government have been compelling assemblies to utilize the resources the way the central government determines. And I mean, delays are very, very, associated with the disassembly common fund.
Okay.
Sometimes they go into arrears for quarters, a whole year. Meanwhile, the law requires that the releases shall be done on quarterly basis. It's even in the constitutional arrangement in Article 252. Government will not abide by these provisions. But the assemblies do not have what it takes to go to court to compel government. So we are talking about central government accountability. We are talking about the assembly's ability to function effectively and meet the expectations of the people. We have to make the assemblies more independent and more autonomous so that they can hold on to these accountable principles. And for that matter, MMDAs ought to be elected. All the assembly members ought to be elected. The 30% allocation to central government ought to be done away with. So we have a fully functional assembly that will be accountable to the people and be able to deliver on their mandate.
Right. Thank you very much, Josh Sheba, for your time joining us there from our studios in Kumasi, and of course Mohammed Awal and Mavis Zupok Domi, both research officers of the Center for Democratic Development. Thanks very much for joining us.